At this point, I am excited and honored to introduce our moderator for our program, Joseph Tomás McKellar. Joseph is Executive Director of PICO California. He has worked for 20 years as a faith-based organizer in San Diego and Orange counties, as well as the Central Valley, and was the founding director of Faith in New York. Joseph is a Stanton Fellow with the Durfee Foundation, as well as an Aspen Civil Society Fellow and a member of the Aspen Leadership Network. Welcome, Joseph.
Thank you, V. Fight on just a little while longer. Everything is going to be all right. Thank you, Mother Michelle. Wow. From St. Mark United Methodist Church in Los Angeles with LA Voice. I was so struck by what deep faith, what audacious faith it takes to say everything is going to be all right. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much. Good evening. Buenas noches to all of you. Welcome, friends. What a blessing it is to be with you across the virtual airwaves this evening. What a moment we're all living through. One of the refrains I've been telling myself is something that Fred Ross Sr. used to say to people like Marshall. Maybe Marshall said it to him. Fred Ross Sr., who founded the community service organization, mentored Cesar Chavez, was a big part of the United Farm Workers movement. He used to say, if there's something to do, do it now. And he would also say, if you wait until you have all the money, all the people, all the perfect plans to act, you will miss windows with which you can walk through to bend the moral arc of the universe towards justice. And those windows don't stay open forever. A couple of weeks ago, I got an alert on my phone that there was a raid happening at a car wash a mile and a half from my home. And a few hours later, after I was able to get in my car, I drove to the car wash. And upon arrival, it looked like business as usual. There was customers and people washing cars. And so I paid to get my car washed in an effort to have an excuse to speak to somebody. And when my car was done being cleaned, a man waved a towel over at me and said, as to say, come on over to get my car. And I walked over to him and I introduced myself and I asked him in Spanish if there had been a raid here today. And the man's name was Edgar, and he looked down and he said, yes, there was a raid here today. He said they took 3 of us. They took 3 of my coworkers, including my nephew, mi sobrino. And I looked at him and I said, and they didn't take you. He said, no. He said, I escaped. I ran past the men with masks on and with assault rifles in their hands. And I ran past them and I got to a Jack in the Box where I jumped into a dumpster and I hid for a few hours until I called my boss and asked if the ICE officers were still at the car wash. And when he said that they weren't, I went back to work. And sweat was dripping down his face. He looked tired. He looked exhausted. And I just said, Edgar, I said, I'm so sorry. I said, what is going through your head and your heart right now? And he said, I'm worried about my nephew. I'm also worried about how we're going to pay the rent because my nephew lives with us and he helps us pay the rent. And I don't know how we're going to stay in our apartment now. I don't know how we're going to stay housed. And we were able to get Edgar some benevolence fund resources that LA Voice and PICO have been able to raise to help him, at least in the short run, pay the rent to weather this storm. I've talked to the auxiliary bishop, the Catholic bishop in Orange County, to help organize a vigil at the car wash as a way of lamenting and bearing witness to this separating of families in our community and to try to appeal to the moral conscience of people, not just in Orange County, but across the country, to this moral travesty that is taking place. And you all know very well, whether you know somebody in your own life or just by watching the news, that there are many, many Edgars in the world around us. There are thousands upon thousands of families being separated every day. And it is not just a question of immigrant communities being impacted right now. We face a near-term future where many more families will be separated, where our cities will be occupied by military forces, where millions of families will lose their health coverage, food assistance, where hard-fought gains from the civil rights movement will continue to be eroded, and where wealth and power are even more concentrated in the hands of a few. We are in the midst of an authoritarian and autocratic slide. On Monday, the Supreme Court ruled that if you look Latino and you speak Spanish and you work hard, you are fair game to be detained by ICE. They just made racial profiling legal again. Our nation is in crisis, and the stakes could not be higher for our safety and our collective freedom. And across PICO, across the network, we are joining with those who realize that we can no longer do business as usual. The sacred text in some of our faith traditions says, you don't put new wine into old wineskins. You put new wine into new wineskins. And we are trying to embrace this challenge to become new wine as we bear witness to the pain, but also as we let our light shine with the faith that Michelle sang with a few minutes ago. This summer, we launched what we call Rooted and Rising. Rooted and Rising is a program where we're training and supporting everyday people to bring family, friends, neighbors into house meetings across the state to share their pain and to find hope in taking action together, to hold vigils, to provide mutual aid and food assistance, to accompany people into courtrooms and courthouses where families are being separated, to try to shield them from being separated, and to push corporations to be accountable for them making profit, billions of profit off of the misery of people. And by the end of this fall, we're shooting for 1,000 of these Rooted and Rising house meetings with 10,000 people to be more deeply connected to one another and to be ready to take action together. This is just one way forward, one way of trying to do things differently, to becoming new wine. But I think we are in need of much more discussion and discernment and imagination about how to do things differently to change the trajectory of our nation and its people. What does it take for each of us to take a risk and to do something new in this moment, to summon the courage to take a risk, to run towards the fire, to get proximate to the margins, and to put our finger in the wounds of our communities? The Hebrew prophet once said, "See, I am doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it?" This is our call to be co-creators with the divine, to bear witness and to let our light shine with deep conviction and endurance. That is why I'm so excited to welcome our guest this evening, this distinguished, wise panel of wisdom holders and justice seekers and freedom fighters who are with us tonight. Let me briefly introduce each of them, and then we're going to get into conversation. First is Professor Marshall Ganz. Marshall is a dear friend who grew up in Bakersfield, California. Folks on this call from Faith in the Valley and Kern County. He organized with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee with Chavez and the United Farm Workers. More recently, he helped design the grassroots organizing effort for the Obama for America campaign. Marshall's new book, People, Power, and Change, Organizing for Democratic Renewal, draws on the values, ideas, and craft core to the practice of organizing and offers an actionable framework to do it. My good friend, Rabbi Susan Goldberg, is with us. She is the founder of Nefesh, which is an open-hearted, progressive, spiritual community capturing the energy and vitality of the east side of Los Angeles. Rabbi Susan and Nefesh are proud to be actively involved in LA Voice, the PICO Network, many other organizations in our region. She's a fourth-generation Angelino, and she's been active with, again, as I said, other organizations, Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice and New Ground, a Muslim-Jewish Partnership for Change. And last but certainly not least is my good friend, my dear brother, Bishop Dwayne Royster, who is Executive Director of Faith in Action, the largest global international faith-based grassroots organizing network. For the last decade, Bishop Royster has served as Executive Director of Power Interfaith in Pennsylvania. He led groundbreaking campaigns to equalize school funding, to raise wages for workers, and to create green jobs in Black and Latino communities. Join me, if you would, in welcoming Bishop Dwayne, Rabbi Susan, and Marshall. Thank you so much to each of you for being with us. Marshall, I want to start with you, and I'm going to dive right in. Marshall, you've been organizing for a long time. You've been training organizers, you've been studying movements for, I'm told, over 60 years. I thought you were in your 50s, but for 60 years now. Marshall, what is your assessment of this moment that we are in? What are both the perils, but also the incredible opportunities we have?
Oh, yes. Thanks, Joseph. Wait, let me fix my view here. I'm going to be able to see everybody. So, good evening. Muy buenas tardes for todos. And thank you for this opportunity to have this kind of conversation, which we need to be having in so many different places in this time. From my point of view, I think when it comes to American democracy, this is probably a rock bottom moment. And it just gets more rock bottom every day, so it sort of defeats what that means. And I think it's important to recognize why. And and I guess, well, the first thing that I'd say about it, though, see, rock bottom moments ought to teach us that what we've been doing is not working. And that to do more of the same is it's like an addiction. We do more of the same. It's an opportunity to sort of make real change, but it means seeing the opportunity in the moment and finding, and I'll just say what I mean by that. Tom Hayden used to say, change is slow except when it's fast. And this is a fast moment. It's high uncertain. There's all kinds of anxiety about radical uncertainty, as there should be. I think under these circumstances, to be an optimist or a pessimist is arrogant because it presumes to predict the future, and we can't predict the future. I think hope is different. I think hope is much more realistic. My understanding of hope was that of Maimonides, a 12th century Spanish scholar, who taught that hope is belief in the plausibility of the possible as opposed to the necessity of the probable. In other words, it is always probable Goliath will win, but sometimes David does. It was improbable we'd elect a Black man president of this country in 2007, but it happened. In other words, hope is the place between certainty and fantasy. It's the domain of could be, of possibility. That's where the creativity, that's where the imagination, that's where faith can do its work. And I think the problem is that we often look for it in the wrong place. Who is going to come and save us? Or what's the 10-year plan that will totally, no, it's not. I mean, where do we look for it? Well, let me just ask, if you've had an experience of hurt, would you raise your digital hand? I see, if you've had an experience of hurt, come on, if you've been on the planet, it's likely that you've had that. Now, oh, look at this, all right. But let me ask another question is, have you had an experience of hope? Let me see those hands. Have you had an experience of hope? See, if you hadn't had the hurt, you wouldn't think the world needed fixing. And if you hadn't had the hope, you wouldn't be on this call. In other words, sometimes we look out there for what's in here. And in this kind of time is when it's so important that we hopefully join with one another to do the work, to take the risks, to exercise the creativity, and to build the power that we need. So, yes, I think this is a rock bottom moment, but I also think that it's a moment of opportunity. And the challenge is not to get caught in, oh, it's so terrible, because it is. But that's been one of the major problems I think that folks that share our values have. We know what we're resisting, but we don't know what we're fighting for. And this is a real problem in the presidential campaign. Who could scare the people more? That's what that campaign ended in. That's not how you build a movement. That's not how you become creative. So we have a lot of work to do in telling our own story in a way that it's heard and in a way that it offers an alternative to the Trump story. What Trump does, he says, I see your pain. I see your fear. But you know what? It's not your fault. It's their fault. And so come together with me and we'll hit on them and just follow me and I'll be your redeemer. That's now the counter narrative is, I see your hurt. I see your pain. I also see your possibilities. I also see that as a human, you're capable of development, of learning and making choices. And that's when you connect to hope. And that story, that second story, has simply not being told out there. And I'll just say, you need to stop me when it's time to stop, but I just say, be careful, somebody gets on the pulpit. But first, I think it's so important to recognize that our Constitution is an oligarchic constitution. It's not a democratic constitution. And we've been in this tension about, demos, democracy means the governed govern. And that's certainly one view. But our country was also born with a different view, that some are to govern and others are to obey. And those two perspectives have been at war with one another throughout our history. And when people say, oh, that's not who we are, sorry, it is who we are. We are in struggle with one another to shape what this can be, what this could be. Or as Langston Hughes wrote, the America that must be, but that hasn't been. So the other thing is that our electoral system, since Buckley v. Vallejo in 1976, when the Supreme Court ruled that money is speech. Now, no other democracy has that. Everybody puts constraints on campaign spending, and as a result, people can be at the center of things. Over here, there's no constraints. And what it's done is create this electoral marketing industry that turns people into data points, that dehumanizes fundamentally in the way. So politics, instead of people engaging with other people, it becomes data points with data points. And that's about as far removed as you can get from what it is to see the humanity in each other. So one area we need to do work is to recognize our own value, our own worth, and that of others. I think without that, we don't have a starting point. In the movement work that I was involved in, it wasn't telling people how bad things were. They knew that. It was a question that they were worth much more, that their dignity, their value as a human being was much more. And so the question was to find the courage to claim it. And the last thing I'll just say is I was at a dinner at MIT with Tim Berners-Lee, the guy that invented the World Wide Web. And he was saying that machines can make decisions, but only humans can make choices. And his point was that a machine is a calculating device. That's what it does. It calculates. It's all based on zeros and ones. Now, human beings, we can calculate, but we learn through our emotions. We learn through our bodies. We learn through our experience. We are capable of judgment. And judgment is the capability as human beings that we have, and we need to cultivate that rather than getting so hung up on AI. In fact, the danger is that we try to become more like AI, which simply robs us of our humanity. So I think the starting point is to recognize our own worth and value. And in various religious faith traditions, to reject that would be to reject the gift God's given us. It would be to cheapen it. It would be to make less of it. And that's not what this is about. So for me, that's a starting point.
Thank you, Marshall. So beautiful. Such a great way to start us. And I think we're gonna discern over the course of the next hour, like what are the choices before us? What are the choices we can take as individuals and collectively that live in that space between hurt and hope and help us get clear, not just about what we're resisting, but what we're fighting for, as you said. So thank you, Marshall. Rabbi Susan, I'd like to invite you to the proverbial floor here. You, Rabbi Susan, have been on the front lines as a faith leader in Los Angeles with ICE patrolling our streets, separating families, with the National Guard, the Marines sent here as an occupying force. You were among those leading the vigil we had together in downtown where we marched to the federal building to lay flowers at the feet of the National Guard. Could you just reflect on that night, that experience, and just what has happened since then? Your reflections on the role of people of faith and faith leaders in building the movement that we need.
Thank you. I really appreciate those words, Marshall, and the naming of the radical uncertainty that we are in. And this is really a tremendous space for people of faith to be present in because we know about radical uncertainty. This is where we walk, and it is also where we offer what is possible. And so I feel like there's a tremendous need as we have seen and experienced in Los Angeles, as we have literally been, confronting nonviolently authoritarianism and the takeover of our city. It has just been a time of such intense fear and cruelty, just such cruelty in Los Angeles, as you had shared, Joseph, just one of so many stories. And also, important to say, a time of people coming together in unbelievable ways, building by building, neighborhood by neighborhood, school by school, worship community by worship community, to take care of each other, to protect each other in ways that are incredible and inspiring. And it's important to keep stating also how we are beautifully resisting every day and all the time. So there have been many days and many nights of bearing witness and standing nonviolently in direct confrontation with these forces of cruelty and authoritarianism. Appreciate, Marshall, also what you said about being in the moment and making choices in the moment, which is what we've had to do again and again. And it wasn't particularly intense when the National Guard and Marines moved in, but also just want to say it continues in Los Angeles. I know sometimes when the spotlight moves, people think, oh, maybe it's better. People are still being terrorized and separated from their family on a daily basis. So we were present as people of faith on the first day of the raids began on June 6th, but we were also ready because we knew it was coming. We had started seeing people taken in the courts in the days before and knew that it was coming, had done lots of training to get people ready, but nothing really could have prepared us for the cruelty that unfolded and continues to unfold. There was a rally for the union movement after David Huerta had been taken, and it was on that day, which is a couple days before the vigil you're referring to, Joseph, that a group of clergy that we decided to go ahead and make a line in front of the National Guard and to hold a line of nonviolence and directly confront what was happening. The next day, there was a madrinas gathering through CLU, which is the godmothers of the disappeared gathering that was just beginning, and just to say goes on every week still, every week at the detention center. And there we brought flowers. And so that became part of a ritual of what we did that led to the vigil, the very powerful vigil that LA Voice organized. And on that night, with the Marines now there and the National Guard, we gathered together for prayer. And then we walked, those who were willing, we walked over to where the National Guard and Marines were. Pastor Eddie Anderson and myself made this choice to, again, go right up to the steps and confront what was happening. And it was interesting to watch their reactions. We could see some fear in their eyes, some uncertainty, and then some reacted by just masking up, getting ready with their masks and their non-lethal so-called non-lethal weapons pointing at us. And it was that moment that we made a choice to pray. And at that very moment, clergy from all faiths and community members just began praying. Some got on their knees, some stood just right where they were, held each other and prayed right in the face of the authoritarian power just pointed at everyone. And as leadership, I'll say that we were holding both the importance of keeping people safe, right? There were elders, there were folks that were confronting in a way that was very powerful. I know some of you, I see some of you who were there on this gathering right now. And it was also an important moment to be exercising those muscles of courage. To say in that moment, this is our city, these are our streets, we are caring for our people, and that we say no. We say no fully, beautifully, deeply, and enthusiastically to what they were putting before us. And part of what nonviolence allows us to do is to claim a new reality right in that moment. In that moment, we claim the streets as our place, as a place of justice and love and compassion. And that right there, we were going to stand right there, right in a place that they wanted us to move back. We were going to move forward. And we did. We prayed right in that space. We moved forward. And it began to transform the humanity of what was happening. It helped to exercise the courage for everyone there. And it felt as if we were also sending it out to the country, saying to everyone, this is what we're going to need to do. We're going to stand in love and nonviolence again and again. Will we be scared? Yeah, sometimes we're going to be scared. And we're going to stand right in this place. We're going to take care of each other, and we're going to do it again and again. The thing about courage is that it's shared. Courage is shared. We get it from our ancestors. We share it with each other. We give it to each other. We receive it from each other. So in that moment, it was a moment of shared and collective loving courage. And it got more and more intense as the first of the curfews were moving in. Horses came, they came in all kinds of vehicles, horses, motorcycles, right? It was a big show trying to tell us that this was a space for the authoritarian takeover of our city. And we just kept praying and loving on each other and taking care of each other. And that around the country began to shift the narrative. And it was a very important time to claim a moral voice, to say, actually, you're telling some story that isn't true. We see you. We're standing here for our beloveds who were taken, and we are not going to back down or go away. We will be here lovingly and nonviolently again and again and again. There is an idea in the natural world that is called a refugia. And a refugia is an area where different species come to protect each other and to create a refuge in times of peril. So it's in low resourced areas in times of danger, and we're seeing it a lot with climate catastrophe. And what we were doing in that time was literally creating a refugia together, creating a refuge, creating a sanctuary to say, this is our sanctuary of our values. And that is right what our sacred scripture tells us. Asuli mikdash b'shochanti b'tocham. Make for me a sanctuary so that I may dwell amongst you. So that is God saying it is in making refuge for each other that God's presence is with us. And that's what we are doing again and again. And just to say, sometimes it's the moments that I described of facing down Marines with the helicopters and all of that happening. And that feels like an obvious moment of courage. But courage is also working in an office on a Tuesday as a bureaucrat and getting something being told to you and saying, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to comply with something that is not right, that does not follow the deeper truths of love and justice and care and compassion. It also could mean making soup for somebody who just gets back from standing down those Marines, right? That is an important role too. just to say that we all have a role in this time of courage and the repeated exercising of those muscles of courage and of creating refuge and taking care of each other.
So powerful, Rabbi Susan. Thank you so, so much. You gave us so much to chew on there. This idea that part of our job is to make a choice day after day to stand face to face with the pain, the woundedness of our time, to exercise those muscles of courage, which, as you said, are shared. We give and receive courage to one another. And this last piece, you said that we all have a role to play. We all have an offering to make. You know, in your city, if you're not in LA, even if the National Guard or Marines are not in your streets, families are getting separated every day in your city or in your region, in courthouses. And what would it look like for you to bear witness? What are the choices that all of us have before us right now? What does it mean to be a person of faith that is alive in such a moment as this? Thank you, Rabbi Susan. Bishop Royster, um, you have been an organizer as well, and both an organizer and a faith leader, a bishop for over 2 decades. You're based in DC, which is ground zero for a lot of this authoritarian assault. You've witnessed firsthand the military take over your city. Tell us about that. Tell us what you and the people of DC are experiencing, are feeling, as we think about the impact on immigrants, on Black Americans, on communities of color. And just like, what does this time that we're living through tell you about the kind of organizing we need to embrace?
Great. Well, thank you, Joseph, again for the invitation to come and be here. And I'm deeply excited to be here with Professor Ganz and Rabbi Goldberg and all of you as well. And I bring you greetings from the Faith in Action Network. And we're so glad that PICO California is partnered with us in this long-term work. Let me just let me start with DC real quick. So Washington, DC right now, it's actually interesting. I've lived in DC since 2016 when I first became the political director for Faith in Action before going back to Pennsylvania to lead power and then coming back as the ED of Faith in Action. Usually the last 2 weeks of every year in Washington, DC, it is awash with people from around the country coming to see the nation's capital. Pretty much the museums, the things in the area are free. The Faith in Action office is literally 6 blocks from the White House. We are at 16th and P Street in the DC area. And if you walk straight down 16th Street, you will walk into the White House. We're just blocks away from there. The last few days and of August, which is normally full of people and children running around, there was an eerie level of silence in Washington, D.C., just quiet. And everybody was talking about how quiet it was. D.C. has also been known as Chocolate City. For the longest time, at one point in Washington, D.C.'s history, it was 72% African American. It's now only 49% African American. But one of the things that we noted was the vast number of white folk that were walking around, and Black and brown folk were nowhere to be found. Folk were staying home. When school started just a couple of weeks ago, there were schools that had only 50% attendance because people were afraid to bring their children. And we should also say that Washington, D.C. is an international city. Every ethnicity and racial group that you could imagine is in Washington, D.C. All different cultures, all different races, all different classes of people are there. And as a result of what's happening in Washington, D.C., people are afraid to go to work. They're afraid to send their children to school. And we're going to get into a great crisis here shortly in this, not only in DC, or we are in a crisis, but it's going to get worse as the terror, which is what I believe the administration is trying to enact, the terror takes deeper root in our communities. I think we also have to note that the ways that this is being used, that the administration is going to Black-led cities to terrorize brown people and to scare Black folk and other brown folk and Asian Pacific Islander folk and indigenous folk into a level of submission. And I think we have to really call that for what it is, that it's deeply racial, but it's also deeply designed to make us fight each other and instead of finding ways to unify one another. One of the questions that you're asking me in this moment is, what do we have to do to organize, and how do we organize? Back in December of last year, I convened leaders from across the Faith in Action Network in Washington, D.C. And I said to them that we're going to operate with a theme, the architects of a new America, for the next 5 years. And part of the reason we're operating with that is that democracy, as we understand it, is dead. It is not coming back. And to be quite frank, for many of us, including myself and others that look like me across this country, the reality is that America as it was imperfect, but it wasn't really working for us in that moment. The issue is, what is the America that is going to be built? And that we have a responsibility and a call to contend for the new America, not contend for the old one anymore. Now you might say, well, that sounds deeply political. Well, it is deeply political. But let me also suggest to you that it's also the responsibility of faith folk to create the new narrative. And as Dr. Stephen Ray, former president of Chicago Theological Seminary, would say, we have to create the new myth and the new civil religion of America that tells a different story about how America is fitting into God's plan. We have a responsibility in this moment, and we're gathered with some leaders from across the network right now in Chicago. I'm actually literally sitting in a hotel room in Chicago as we're doing this, having conversations about the fact that there are a few things that we have to do in this moment. First is, we've got to build base. And I'm not talking about a very nice perfunctory base. I'm talking about we need to build massive amounts of people. Every federation should have 10,000 leaders that they can call on at any given point in time, that not only are just folk to show up for mobilizations, but are actually going through a developmental process of leadership development. Because when this all comes to a head, we need to make sure that we have people in place that are going to be prepared to lead, and so that we can get to a place of co-governance. I've said to folk today in our gathering that I no longer want to use the definition that we have used about power for a very long time, which is the ability to act or influence. Power is one thing, it is one thing only. It is our ability to control the destiny of our communities, and anything less than that is not power. It is, if we don't control the destiny of our communities, then somebody else will. And then we are not even going to be able to influence, like right now. We have big actions happening around the country, and it's not changing anything. The purpose of those actions in this moment has to be for us to be there to find people that are energized by this moment and take them through a developmental process, help them to understand how to organize, how to lead in this moment, how to invite other people into the work with us so that we can build the power that's sufficient, that when the right moment comes, and I'm not sure if it was Professor Ganz or Joseph that said this earlier, but there's a moment that comes that everything will turn, and we'll be able to step into that place because we're prepared and ready, not only because we've organized good people, because we have to do good organizing, base building work, but because we've also done the cultural warfare work of creating a new narrative, a new faith narrative for America that everybody can see themselves in, that lines up both with their material condition and their soul condition simultaneously.
Wow, Bishop taking us to church. Architects of a new America. I'm so inspired by that, Bishop, and I'm so inspired by this idea that we need to build massive amounts of people. We need to bring people off the sidelines and to go on a journey together. And I hear your point. We don't have the power right now to stop the atrocities that we are seeing in the world around us, but bearing witness isn't about fixing the problem in the immediate sense. Bearing witness is about something much deeper. It's about being proximate. It's about showing up with and for each other. It is about exercising faith, a faith that is alive. And so thank you, Bishop, for bringing that spirit to us this evening. Marsha, I want to go back to you. You opened up your remarks talking about this being a rock bottom moment for democracy. You write about this in your most recent book. And combining a bit of what we heard from Rabbi Susan and Bishop Dwayne, which is this vision for a vibrant, courageous faith community, people who are reclaiming what it means to be people of faith and spirit. And I just wonder, as you look across the country today, you look at movements, you look at the field of organizing, what are we getting right as it relates to defending democracy, defending people? And what do we need to do differently in order to embrace this challenge to become new wine and to build new wineskins and to spark value-centered organizing at the scale that Bishop Royster was just envisioning?
Well, step one, then step, no, I'm kidding. That's not it. I don't think we know. I think what we have to do is get on the path of discovery and learning, because, I like those three Hillel questions about, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I'm for myself alone, what am I? If not now, when? In that last question, the presumption is that in order to learn how to do what we want to do well, we have to begin to do it. In other words, that understanding flows from action. It doesn't precede it. You get stuck in what Jane Addams called the snare of preparation. But to learn within and from action means actually learning. I mean, it means doing the work to understand, to develop our growth, our capabilities, develop leadership, as Bishop Royster said, is fundamental. But, the question is, who is doing that and how can it be done on the scale required? I was introduced to organizing in social movements. I wasn't really introduced to it in traditional community organizing and civil rights movement, farm worker movement. And social movements are a little bit different, because social movements have a very strong cultural dimension to them, in which people are re-understanding themselves, their community, and what the values are that they're ready to fight for. And so, see, with all due respect, I don't have a lot of interest in resistance. I want to fight, and I want to take it to them. I want to be proactive, and I want us to do the work to be able to articulate and experience to one another what in the world we're fighting for. Democracy, frankly, means very little to most people. I mean, at this point, it's like, maybe an election, but it's so decoupled from people's lives. I mean, that's what at the Kennedy School, they have this thing after the election with the campaign management from both campaigns. And so I spent a day and a half with the Trump people and the Harris people in the same room, which was kind of interesting experience. But it was very clear that what the Harris campaign was doing, they were trying to tell people how they ought to feel rather than listening to how they felt. That's a huge difference. And that's the arrogance of the kind of electoral machine that people spend billions of dollars on. In other words, we have to bring people into the process, see people. There was a New York Times sent a reporter with an organizer in Wisconsin right after Kamala was nominated. And they go up to a house, a woman comes out, the organizer says, gee, I'm with the Harris campaign. You must really be concerned about choice. Well, she kind of says a little bit. And then education, climate. He starts running down a list. How do I categorize this person? Not how do I see this person? How do I relate with this person? It's rather, how do I categorize them? What label do I give them? See, the radical dehumanization that's built into the way we do electoral politics is something we have to challenge. But it means by putting people back in the center of it. So when we talk about, in my experience with nonviolence and nonviolent resistance, it's not, a lot of people are being trained in tactics right now. That doesn't, it requires discipline. It requires deep organization. It requires offering alternatives. Gandhi, it's unfortunate that it was translated nonviolence. Satyagraha means truth force. It's not about non-anything. It's about offering the alternative ways to fight. And that is what we're in. So see, to me, I think we have a whole lot of learning we need to do. We need to be clear about the values, about really what the values are. Issues I think can be very problematic. You get the tree people and the fish people. And so then the tree people, no, it's all about trees. No, it's all about fish. And then they're competing for the same donors. So it's got to be all about fish or trees. They both have reverence for the natural world. That's their values. You choose issues strategically. You don't define yourself by an issue. See, and that is where faith communities are so important in this whole thing, because they're rooted in a sense of value, of worth, of being a gift. Life is a gift from God. I mean, we don't squander that. We are grateful for it with all its challenges. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is really building a base out there. And I hate the word base. It's like, oh, I stand on a base. I think I like the word constituency more. It comes from the Latin constare, which means to stand together. It's about bringing people together to stand together and learn together and act together. But that's the work we got to do and not just talk about it. I have to have a little political commercial here because I think Mamdani is doing an amazing campaign in New York. And I think that it's a bright spot. And I think it has a lot to do with listening to people, conversing with people, not trying to sell people, not trying to categorize people, but actually engaging. My old friend from the farmers, Jim Drake, came here to Boston to organize Greater Boston Interfaith. First year, he had 2,000 101s. People are saying, "What are you doing? Just all these 101s?" Well, when they had their launch, they had about 3,000 people in Dorchester. That was one of the most racially diverse sessions that there was. See, he invested, and that's what we invest in engaging with people, not selling, but in building relationship. So much, and I know that sounds like, oh, relationship. So many of our interactions these days are they're transactions. They're not relationships. For example, one of my students may invite another student. Let's go have a cup of coffee. I'm interested in talking to you. Okay, if we have a great conversation. And they say, well, let's get together again next week. And the other one says, I got exams. Well, the next week, I got people coming from out of town. Well, what about the next week? I'll send you an email. Now, sociologically speaking, the person just got dumped. That's kind of what happened. Because what was not there was the courage to risk commitment to that person and to commit their most valuable resource, which is their time. Relationships are built from commitment. Trust comes from those. It doesn't precede it. It grows from them. And transactions are of the moment. Relationships construct a future. That's the whole. But with all this mobilizing that goes on out there, who's building what? I mean, what are we building? To me, that's the question. And it starts with whom are we engaging in sustainable relationships with so that we learn and grow together and develop what we need to do. So for me, the priority is doing that in reality. But it means going out, listening to people, not just selling. That's Mandami's very good at that. I mean, he actually listens. Shocking. People talk about his use of technology. They miss the point. There's a real thing there. And the real thing, that's a big deal. There's courage. I mean, if you're a Muslim and an immigrant and a socialist, any one of those should eliminate you from any serious political contention in this country. Hey, this guy's doing that. And so people look for courage, they look for integrity, and they look for meaning in terms of their lives. I don't know, I don't want to get off on this whole thing, but as you can see, to me, it's a moment of light. One of the other moments of light, 50,000 volunteers, young people, not paid canvassers, not this kind of paid operations, which just, yeah, it's a job, okay. No, these are volunteers. In the Obama campaign, people would come and say, we want to learn Obama's story. Say, no, he does a good job with his story. You got to learn your own, because that's what people are going to be interested in, is why you are for this, what this means in terms of your own life. And so it just feels to me we have so much untapped power and capability, but we really have to get organized to do it and not kid ourselves. And leadership development, to me, is person takes responsibility for more people. I mean, if there's an organizer and a bunch of leaders, where's the leadership development? No, those people we call leaders, their job is to go out there and be leaders, to recruit more people. That's the only way we get to numbers in organizing, is by people engaging other people. When people have a growth experience, they want more and they want to share it. And so if in our organizing and our campaigns, it's just we drive people into utter boredom by this, that, or the other, without the celebratory, the redemption part of it all, well, yeah, then they don't stick around. So for me, you look at three outcomes. One, did we win whatever we're trying to do? But the second, did we come out of it stronger than we went into it? Sadly, too often, we may win or lose, but we never want to see anybody ever again who was involved in the campaign. I think you know what I'm talking about. I doubt I'm the only person in the world that's had that experience. So you have to ask yourself, what do we build? What do we build? We didn't build anything. Did we build power? No, it's gone. So taking seriously the real fundamentals, and they're not like some brand new thing. I mean, one of the reasons that faith traditions offer so much is the wisdom is ancient. And as human beings, we've been struggling with the same stuff for a long time. What do we do with fear? How do we find hope? How do I experience being worth it? How do I recognize my brother or my sister? They're human challenges. And so it's not finding some new digital tool. It's digging into our capabilities as humans and doing that in a serious way. I guess the last thing I'll say about this is we talk about training. See, I don't think we need training. I think we need formation. And the difference is huge. Formation means, yes, we acquire skills, but we're also acquiring values. We're creating a culture. We're developing our character as people. So I don't believe in models. I believe in practices, because a model is a snapshot of a dynamic process in a moment. And then we got a box and we try to fit people into these boxes. Practices are dynamic, they're evolving, they involve skills, but also they involve values, and also they involve concepts. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we have to put the heart back into this work. And you go to so many meetings that want to talk about strategy and tactics. Well, wait a second. Well, why? Everybody gets focused on the how, and they forget about the why. The why is the source of motivation. Like St. Augustine said, one thing to know the good, another to love it. Loving it is what enables action on it. Knowledge does not equal action in the absence of love, of motivation. Again, faith traditions are so well equipped with the capacity for this. And the country really needs it. Democracy, if it's to be real, it means people actually feel seen. People actually feel valued. It's not an election. It's a culture of valuing one another of equal value, and then building our power out of that. So I don't know, I feel like I just gave a little sermon. I'm sorry about that. I don't have a collar, but but the spirit is there. No, I just think what we're talking about right now is really important, and that we take it seriously, and that we not look for the magic blueprint, because it's not there. But within us is the capacity to find our way, but we got to get on the path. And that's about bringing in more people to real scale. And I know I've had sometimes training organizers or forming organizers, go out and have a listening campaign. Well, wait, what am I going to tell them? Well, no, you're going to go ask them. That's what you're going to do. How about that? Listen. Well, but, I mean, we're so stuck on this. We got to sell things. We've got to, we got to label things rather than listening, engaging, and learning with our hearts as well as our head and our hands. And these are easy phrases to say, but boy, this is where the work is, and we got to do it. I think we have to do it.
Wow.
Amen.
Marshall, amen. Yeah, you're getting a lot of exploding hearts on the screen here. Marshall, thank you so much. We just have a few minutes before we're going to move to the call to action, and then we're going to give each of you one more kind of final closing question. But I do want to give just Bishop Royster and Rabbi Susan. Maybe we'll start with you, Rabbi Susan, just kind of to react to this provocation that we hear from Marshall about doing it, about acting our way into new ways of being and thinking and meeting the moment and taking risk. Like, what are your thoughts on what Marshall just said? What really spoke to you, and what would be your challenge and invitation to this community?
Listening to Marshall, I'm so glad to tell you, Marshall, that everything you're talking about theoretically, all the theory that you just put out there and the beautiful ideas are happening all over Los Angeles. And I am so excited for folks to really learn about the relational organizing that is happening in Los Angeles on a scale that we have never seen before. And I think when you're in other parts of the country, and there's only one real piece that did some solid reporting on it in the New York Times. And that's probably good that it's underground in some ways, but it is unbelievably powerful. The relational organizing, and not just listening campaigns, because sometimes those can go and go, but listening and doing that is happening. I mean, because it was a crisis, it was an emergency. And people relied on the relationships they already had with parents at the school, for example, to begin taking care of the most impacted families at that school. People have relied on the relationships that they already had and have been deepening them in their neighborhood. There is neighborhood by neighborhood rapid response in Los Angeles like no one has ever seen. There are pre-patrols looking for ICE before they come. Then there are the post-patrols who are taking care of the families once they've been taken. People are bearing witness every day in immigration court.
Susan, I don't mean to interrupt, but what are they fighting for?
People are fighting for a very clear vision of a city that takes care of everyone and takes care of the most vulnerable and is a place of love and compassion. It is very much a time in Los Angeles where the sense of ownership, this is our city, it belongs to us, and what do we want it to be, is a deep part of the conversation. And, I was raised by organizers. I've been an organizer my whole life, and I have never seen what is happening in Los Angeles happening. A group of teachers who had the summer off went every day to the courts to bear witness and to protect each other, to take care of each other, and to organize in a way that, like I said, it's unprecedented. And what you were saying, Bishop, so true, that the most impacted folks that, of course, in this are Black and brown folks. And what is the role for people to bear witness and support when we're not the most impacted group? And part of that is to make relationships, to organize. What we're doing is worship community by worship community. So saying from one community to another, you have more impacted folks in your community. How can we be of service to you? How can we stand with you? Literally stand outside the church while church is in session, because we don't pray on Sundays, we pray on Saturdays. So we can literally stand around you and around your neighborhood to protect people, to help people get there and go home, right? To get diapers and groceries, to bring soup, to do all the things that families who are being terrorized and separated are needed. And it is just truly unbelievable. And of course, the cruelty continues, but in some ways, they are trying to get more creative out here because of the creativity of the organizing, the relational organizing that's happening. And it's a wild time, but it is also a time that I hope will be a blueprint that can help in a lot of places, because it is so local. It was like localized, right? Neighborhood by neighborhood, school by school, church and synagogue and mosque to each other, taking care of each other. And just to raise up that point again, that everybody has a role.
Yeah.
Everybody has a role.
Yeah.
It might not be that you can, maybe you're homebound and you cannot get out there, but there are things that you can do from your home. There are so many roles to play. And really, this is a time, if there's ever been a time for everybody to be all in and find my skill set and how can I be most of service to creating this new world that we know is possible. And in fact, we know she's coming because we know her. And our ancestors keep reminding us, right, that we're going there. That's where we're headed. And that being a community of faith, we know that a new world is possible and that we're bringing it in right now. And along the way, there's going to have to be some real risks taken and some real commitment from all of us. No matter our capability, our age, our skill set, we're going to have to all really stand up for what it is that we're building together. And we know that it's possible, but it's going to take more than we've ever had to draw up before.
Thank you, Rabbi Susan.
This generation.
Yeah.
I know that my parents' generation have had to draw up, and my grandparents and my great-grandparents. But for this generation, it's a moment where we're going to have to push out and draw up in ways that we have never had to before, and it's time to do it.
So deeply inspired. Thank you so much, Rabbi Susan. You set us up beautifully for the call to action. We're going to get there in just a moment. But before we do, Bishop Royster, please share with us what's on your heart. How do we get there?
My brother, I'm just going to say it in 2 minutes. I'm just going to do this real quick in 2 minutes for you. So I appreciated Marshall's question to the rabbi about why people were out there fighting in this particular moment. And let me just lay out this vision for you. Children are playing. Their bellies are full. They're laughing. Their parents stand around and watch them. Children of every race, culture, and class are playing together, and they all feel safe. That's the America we long for. Just in DC, just past week, at 13th and U Street, the ICE agents came and disappeared somebody from that community, which is not that far from Howard University. In response, there was and multiple folk have been disappeared out of DC. There was a 12,000 person march, but there were a few of us that came together and said, at 13th and U Street, we're going to have a beloved community banquet where we had Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Baha'i, Sikh, Buddhist. We had moon bounces and face painting. We had food of all different cultures in that place. We had a go-go band, because DC, you have to have a go-go band that played go-go music. And we fellowshipped, we sat at tables, we got to know each other, to build relationship, and we invited people to step into this moment and to dig deeper so that we could build the vision that I just laid out. That's what we have to do right now. Lay out the vision. The Bible says, without a vision, the people perish. The vision we have right now in this country, and especially around faith, is destructive and is bent on sending us to hell. The reality is that we've got to come up with a vision. I don't want to say we want to be countercultural. I want to say that we want to get above the vision that's out there, because we always learn, and I saw Scott Reed on here a little earlier, that the action is in the reaction. And so as long as we're reacting to them, we're living in their imagination. No, we want them reacting to us so that they have to live in ours.
Amen. Amen. Architects of a new America, Bishop.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. We're going to give you all a kind of one final question, but before we do, speaking of the provocation, the invitation to action, V-Win, please tell us how we can, opportunities for us to lean into this moment.
Thank you, Joseph. And Bishop, what a powerful and moving and beautiful vision. Who here tonight, and show me with a heart emoji, show me with a sign, who here is willing to commit to real risk, real courage, standing together? Who has already made the commitment or who would like to recommit tonight? Yes, beautiful, thank you. To bear witness, to provide mutual aid, to be in relationship with our beloveds, as Rabbi Susan said, to hold a house meeting, to do something different and maybe scary. Beautiful, beautiful. So we will be in touch. We will be in touch with information to connect you to your local affiliate and federation. We can provide with our federation's tools and toolkits and ways to get involved, and encourage us to stand together and be courageous together. Right now, we have a specific action that folks can take here, right now, tonight together. You are seeing a QR code pop up on the screen here. You can use your cell phone to scan the code, go to the link, and we are urging that we all take action right now on 2 important bills. As Rabbi Susan and so many others have talked about, it has been painful to see masked, unidentified ICE agents target, criminalize, and violently tear immigrant families apart in recent months. In the words of Father John Pettigo from PICO affiliate PAC San Jose, the point is cruelty, the point is terror. Right now, 2 bills are moving through the California legislature, and they could push back on how law enforcement, including ICE, shows up in our communities, but they must pass this week. The No Secret Police Act requires law enforcement to show ID and bans face coverings by law enforcement. The No Vigilantes Act requires all officers, including ICE, to wear visible name badges and badge information. These bills are intended to strengthen existing laws and create misdemeanor charges for law enforcement who are found guilty of violating these laws. They attempt to bring basic transparency and public safety back to our neighborhoods. And they just recently passed the Assembly floor, so they must now pass the Senate. To tell your state senator to demand dignity, accountability, and to end unchecked police and ICE power. We urge you to take action with these QR codes and to contact your state senators. I'm going to take just a minute here to give everyone a chance to access the forum and send the message. Thank you so much. And now I will turn it back over to you, Joseph. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, V. Thank you so much. And folks, this is one action we can take, but I just want to underscore with V, we are doing these house meetings, these Rooted in Rising house meetings. That is a form of loving action that Marshall and Rabbi Susan and Bishop Royster are encouraging us to take. It's taking responsibilities, taking a risk. It's becoming someone who is inviting others to reflect on the question, what is it like to be them right now? What is it like to be you? And to really listen for the answer, and then to discern together where God is calling us to go, what God is calling us to do. So we really want to encourage you to get plugged in, to submit your information. We'll make sure you get connected to your local federation to consider hosting a house meeting, a Rooted in Rising house meeting in the weeks ahead. You know, Bishop Royster, you brought up Scott Reed, who is on the call, former director of Faith in Action, PICO National Network. He sent us a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Buddhist monk, who once wrote, "This, my dear, is the greatest challenge to being alive, to witness injustice in the world and not allow it to consume our light. This, my dear, is the greatest challenge to being alive, to witness injustice in the world and not allow it to consume our light." Rabbi Susan, Bishop Dwayne, and Marshall, just love to give you all just a couple minutes each before we have to wrap. How do you ensure your light does not get consumed? what are the practices, the encouragement you can share with us such that we can all summon the faith, the courage that is necessary to ensure our light does not get extinguished despite the darkness around us?
So I think I'm up first on this one. So let me just say, earlier today, I was actually in a conversation with someone around something similar to this. There's two things that I'm aware of. One, that this moment that we're living in, while it might be new to us, it is not new to God. And God has been with God's people throughout these circumstances and situations over and over again. And this is what I do know: we will win. It might not be tomorrow, but we will win at some point or another. The other thing that I realized, and it's something that is regarding my ordination vows, and I'm a part of the United Church of Christ, was that one of the things that I was told as I was preparing for that process through the UCC is that I was responsible for the gospel in my generation. Not for previous generations and not for generations to come. I'm responsible for the gospel in my generation. And I think it should be said to us that we are responsible for the organizing now, not what came before and not what will come after us, but how are we responsible in this particular moment? How are we faithful in this particular moment in showing up in ways that allow the fullness of the divine to flow through us and into our communities to build belonging and bridging, but not only build belonging, bridging, but build divine power through us to create the change in the world that we need. Some of you from Faith in Action know I have a saying: I want to change the damn world. I just started in Philadelphia. And the reason is because too many people wake up every morning already feeling like they're living in hell. We have folk feeling like they're living in hell right now. And I believe without a shadow of a doubt that there have been folk throughout history that have done that, but yet God has shown up over and over again through God's people to be able to create that change. I take hope in that, and I get excited every morning when I get up because this is an opportunity for us to show God's love, God's power, and God's resolve to make this world a better place than it is right now.
Amen. Thank you so much, Bishop. Rabbi Susan.
Thank you for that. I'm in the initial mourning stages of mourning the loss of my mother, Ruth Beaglehole of blessed memory. She died 4 months ago, and in the Jewish tradition, we are in immediate mourning for a year. And what that looks like is daily prayer, which we have to do in community when you're mourning. So we can do daily prayer on our own, but when you are a mourner, when you're someone in grief, you require a minyan of at least 10 people. And so for me right now, a very daily practice is I have to find a minyan. It's a daily practice of community and solidarity to say a Kaddish prayer with a group of 9 other people so that we are in community. And it is an ancient practice that reminds us that there are times of great grief and despair in which we are to be together. And those are those times we are in. To feel so personally my own grief at a time when there is so much grief and despair all around us is to be reminded of how much the presence of the divine is held when we are together. And sometimes we need that assignment. Go find 9 other people to say this prayer and to have an active and ongoing practice of community inside of our own loss so that we remember that loss is held and shared in community. So that's one piece. And the other is about faith. For me, I define emunah, which is faith, as being with what is and fighting for what is possible. Being with what is, surrendering, submitting into the divine will. And at the same time, I hold the possibility of my own will and our collective will to make change. And that is a daily practice of emunah. It's one of our midot, or our values, or our value driven community at Nefesh, midot driven, all of us working daily to embody these spiritual values. And there is a verse in Psalm 118, which is also in the Song of the Sea, that says, Ozi v'zimrat ya, vayahi li lishua. My strength, my own strength, Ozi, balanced with Zimrat Yah, with the song of God. There is our salvation. To be with what is, to surrender to the divine, to the miracle, and to be in the struggle. To make what is possible. That is faith.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Amen, Rabbi Susan. And thank you for bringing your mother into the space. Ruth Beaglehole presente. She is with us. Marshall, please take us home.
So I'm supposed to follow this, right? Yeah. No, look, I feel like I'm blessed because on a regular basis, I get to have a conversation with the future. Teaching for me is hope. Because Walter Brueggemann wrote that book, Prophetic Imagination, and he says, for transformational vision, it requires first criticality, recognizing the world's pain, of its hurt, of its need. But he says the other is possibility, is hope. And one without the other goes to despair or complacency, but together they can create a powerful tension that is generative of possibility and of change. And young people come of age with a critical eye on the world they find, almost of necessity, hopeful hearts. So I get to engage with people like almost every day. It feels like I'm privileged to have a conversation with the future every day. That for me is incredibly generative. And it's not just with students, it's the people we work with in many, many different settings. And because your experience, how can I say, the power of organizing for me was you are able to see, you're able to see change every day in the people with whom you work, in the people whom you help form, in how they form you. But it's about building the power to change the structural conditions that are responsible for the problems. So it's like putting the two together. And to me, that's where the real power is putting those two together. So I don't know. I think I'm just going to end with my favorite Jesus quote. I know I'm getting a little bit out of my territory here, but I love the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 10, verse 16, where Jesus is about to send his apostles out to tell the new story. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're telling a new story. And he says, if I'm to set you as sheep among wolves, you must be innocent as doves and wise as serpents. See, the point is that people say, oh, I'm a pragmatist, I'm an idealist. See, that dodges the point is to be both. And that's, to me, where the heart of organizing is. It is to combine being a dove and being a serpent. We can't change the world unless we see it as it is. But then without the dove part, nothing's motivating us to change it. So to me, how to find that sweet spot is really, really important. And I think it's a real time to pay attention to Gospel according to Matthew chapter 10, 16.
Look at you, Marshall. Look at that. Beautiful, beautiful. Please join me in thanking Rabbi Susan, Bishop Royster, Marshall Ganz for joining us for this really sacred, profound encuentro, this time together this evening. As we close our program, we are at time. I just want to invite folks to one final call to action. Consider donating to PICO California and the work we are trying to animate in the world. We rely on grassroots contributions from people like you to fuel our work. You can donate using the QR code that is on your screen. And you just take your phone, take a picture of it, and donate what you can to help us continue to spark the prophetic imagination that Marshall just spoke of. Thank you again to all of you for joining, and may we stay steady and faithful. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Pastor Tanya Lopez, I see you. God bless you.
Hi,
Bendiciones. So good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bendiciones, gracias.